Ducati just announced the 2025 Panigale V2. I have a lot to say, so let's unpack it. Okay, so first of all, why would Ducati make a Panigale V2 final edition and then release a Panigale V2 and a V2S? Strange, but I always wondered what they were going to do in World Supersport. Well, here we are. So here's my experience with Ducati, because I am a Ducatisti at heart. My first Ducati was a 1098S. I did end up high-siding it right in front of the guy's house. It was wet, and if you've ever ridden those old twin Ducatis, they are torque monsters. A couple of years after that, I went on to the 899 Panigales because they had Panigales. I absolutely love the 899, and that was kind of my gateway drug into the Panigale. Shortly, I got a 1299S, and then a couple years after, I got the V4S. Some of y'all who are new here are just starting to see my channel think that the 2025 Panigale V4 that's coming in is my first Panigale. It's not. I've owned multiple. Now, just this last season, I had the opportunity to modify a Panigale V2 owned by my friend Calvin. I got to ride it in the canyons, I got to ride it in the streets, and I got to ride it at the track. That little mini series will be right here if you guys want to see it. It's a good video. So prior to riding a Panigale V2, I always thought the Panigale V2 was more like a Gixxer 750. It is not. What I appreciated about the Panigale V2 that I didn't appreciate prior to riding one is that the Panigale V2 is in a class of its own. Again, I used to think it was like the Gixxer 750, but it's way better than that. As some of y'all know, I did own a Gixxer 750 on this channel, and my opinion on that bike is just get a Gixxer 1000. The weight is so close, and my Gixxer 750 just left me wanting more. But this is not about the Gixxer 750 or the Panigale V2. This is about the new 2025 Panigale V2 and V2S. You see where the confusion is? Let's start with the looks. Do I like the looks? Yeah, it's Panigale V4-esque. There's no winglets. It's a little bit more subtle. From the side, it looks like the Ducati Supersport made love with the Panigale V4, and we have the Panigale V2 and V2S. The way the exhaust is laid out from the side looks funky, but from the rear, it's fine. Visually, as you all know, it's a subjective matter. Do I like it? Yeah, sure, it's fine. It's fine. Oh, I guess here comes the but. Ergonomics looks like it's more tailored towards street riding. They made the seat more comfortable. They made the geometry more comfortable. The clip-ons are not as low, and overall it's just made to be a comfortable super sport. Power wise, we're looking at 120 horsepower, 30 horsepower less than the outgoing V2, and that's because of the new engine. Let's talk about the new engine. It's a 890cc, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, and it's supposed to be an all new design. There's no more Desmodromic valve. Now, if you're not familiar with how valves work, I'm going to try to put it as simple as I can. So the cams in a motor open a valve, and in a traditional valve spring type of motor, the pressure from that valve spring closes the valve. And what these valves do is it lets air into the combustion chamber, and then it lets exhaust gases exit. But we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about the Desmo versus the spring valve. The Desmo valve is actually more like a lever. So imagine the lobe opening a valve spring. On a Desmodromic, the cam lobe opens the Desmo valve, and then there's another cam lobe that closes the Desmo valve. Back like in the historic times when valve springs were new, valve springs were like kind of unreliable. Spring tensions weren't strong enough, and a Desmodromic valve was a lot more reliable. And that's because it had a positive open and a positive close. There was no in between. These days, the valve spring system works. And I gotta commend Ducati for this one, because they are known for the Desmodromic, but this time they opted for valve springs, which gives us longer longevity when it comes to checking valve adjustments. So hats off to you, Ducati, for that one. All right, so they made this bike lighter. Instead of a steel subframe, we now have an aluminum subframe. The wheels were redesigned to save weight. Of course, we got the double-sided swing arm inspired by the Panigale V4 2025, and essentially a combination of weight savings that puts us at 388 pounds dry. So I'm guessing just under 400 pounds wet, which is great. The power to weight ratio, 120 horsepower, under 400 pounds. Probably less in track form. Pretty freaking insane. And also, I forgot to mention, 68 pound-feet of torque. That's a lot. It's plenty. The price is like 15 grand for the base and something around 17 grand for the V2S. So I guess we could call this the budget Panigale, even though that's still pretty freaking high compared to like the Yamaha R9's MSRP, which it is made to compete against. Now, let's get to why we have this new 2025 Panigale V2 and V2S. You guys remember in the R9 video where I said they made this bike more for the track? Well, that's kind of what Ducati did for the V2. So if you guys don't know, the old V2 was just a monster at the track, ton of torque, ton of horsepower, and they would have to like detune the motor or the ECU just so it can compete in World Supersport. Now, for sure, they were thinking, why detune a heavier bike when we could just make a new motor that's lighter with lighter components, get that horsepower to regulation. It's going to be cheaper to produce, so more people will buy it. We'll make an A2 version, and you know what? Let's just make it super comfortable because the racers are going to make it whatever racy geometry that they want anyway. Ducati said, great. That is, and again, like, this bike is a great motorcycle. It's Ducati. It's Ducati. Like, they don't make, depending on who you are, I'm a Ducatisti. They don't make shit products, okay? But I think the Panigale V2 and the V2S for 2025 is the first time I've seen Ducati compromise. Like, we already have a Supersport. For those who want a comfortable Panigale, go get the Ducati Supersport. It's a great bike, and I think it fills that void of, I want comfortable street bike that I may track every now and then. Again, I understand this bike for racing. I totally get it. But it would have been nice to see the old motor in this new body style. If I hadn't ridden the old V2, if I didn't get a chance to like fully test it out, including the track, I probably would have been like, you know, this new V2 is cool. But for a company who's been uncompromising for so long, which is a trait that I love so much about Ducati, and now they came out with this V2 that's just full of compromises, it just takes something away from Ducati for me. Yeah, I don't know. They are trying to compete in the new age supersport market, and maybe they're just a new demographic out there who's looking to buy this bike. Maybe my generation was more reckless and we wanted all the power in the world. We want all the torque in the world, and we want to go the fastest ever in the streets. I don't know. I don't know if that is the case, right? We have an A2 detune version, which I heard it's going to be the same price as the regular version. So what? Look, I'm not saying the new V2 is not good. For what it is excellent. It's an amazing machine. I mean, look at it. Under 400 pounds, 120 horsepower, 68 pound-feet of torque. On paper, it looks like it's going to destroy the Yamaha R9. Yes, you do pay a premium because Ducati, but Ducati standards, the price is not bad. But to me, like some of y'all, when the Ducati Panigale V4 came out with its double-sided swing arm, I think this new 2025 Panigale V2 is just losing the Ducati about it. It's red. It's got the Ducati badge. No Desmodromic, which again, it's not a bad thing, but I don't know. The old V2 was just so cool because it was just on its own plane. If you own a Ducati Panigale V2, the current version, not this new one, I'd say hang on to it. I feel like the price of those bikes, along with the 959, I think it's gonna go up. I don't know. That's my hot take. Let me know what you guys think.